Hello and welcome to the British Dapper, and today we're talking about a sartorial Q&A from top to toe. So today's video is born from the questions that people have asked me over the last few weeks, and in previous videos they've fed back to me certain questions which I've obviously answered to them directly, but I thought the combination of things that they're asking could be incorporated into a video. So we've entitled it Top to Toe because we're starting at the top of the body and working the way down to the bottom, in line with these 5 key questions that people have posed to me. So the first one is by Morris, and Morris asked a question in relation to the country look and about wearing a cap. And he said, instead of wearing the traditional peak cap, could you substitute that for example, a newsboy cap? And in truth, the answer is yes. I don't see why not. I would keep it in keeping with the type of materials that you're using. So if you've got a tweed jacket, there may be something that's going to complement that in the hat. So for example, it might be actually that you don't wear a tweed hat with a tweed jacket. You might wear a corduroy hat or maybe a wax hat or some other version of that, or maybe a plain colour. So yes, within reason, I don't see any problems with using a newsboy cap. And if you go back in time, chances are you would have found people wearing newsboy caps as well as the traditional flat. So the flat cap is straightforward peak, and it's a very elegant look and one that you see very often with country gentlemen wearing. And other than the newsboy cap, which is slightly more beefed out and has panels, so you're talking about 8 panels in total, and normally a stud or a button on the top, and the peak sticking out from underneath it. Typically a very good look, and depending on the materials used, could be herringbone, could be tweed, could be a very plain material, a wool or worsted wool, and I think it goes really well. The other thing to bear in mind is that you could go for a traditional waxed version, waxed canvas, and this is a flat cap version, but it goes really well with that country look and that country vibe. And it does keep your head warm and relatively dry. So the next question is posed by Paul, and he asked about, I'd mentioned it in one of my videos about an untipped tie. Well, an untipped tie, if you see here, there's 2 versions I've shown you here. One is the untipped tie and the tipped tie. So this is talking about, for example, here is an untipped tie. So we have the material is all one, and it is folded and sewn on the edges. There is no additional material used behind the actual blade. There might be a little bit of padding on the inside, inner lining, but again, it's unfinished, untipped. Okay, now this goes back to about the 1930s, 1920s, even that era, where the emphasis of the tie was more about the knot and that area here where the tie would show. Most people would have their jackets done up and they would wear a waistcoat, so therefore there was no real emphasis or requirement to be concerned about the bottom part of the tie, and it was cheaper to manufacture as well when you're only dealing with one type of material. Now the purists, when it comes to wearing ties, consider this to be the more upper echelon than a standard tipped tie. and that's because it's the more historical, natural way of having a tie made. I would say there's a revival in untipped ties of late, the last 5 to 10 years, and we see an increase in bespoke ties being made that are like this, that are simply untipped. Now the difference you can see here, this is a tipped tie, and what that means is if you look here, in this case it's using a different fabric. This backing material actually tends to be a lot cheaper than the actual outer tie material, so it's a way of keeping the costs down. Normally you'll find it a contrasting colour as well, but that's neither here nor there. Really, it is a case that this is on the back of the original outer tie, and it gives a much more cleaner aesthetic. I'm led to believe this is from about the 1950s onwards, where people stopped wearing or reduced the amount of wearing of waistcoats and became a much more relaxed look, and with this flaps around it looked a little bit ungainly. So the idea was that you put a backing on it to make it look a little bit more luxurious. It also added a little bit of padding as well, and this was a way of achieving a thicker knot if required, if that was needed. Now I would say in modern days we actually have an inner lining used to create that thickness in the tie. So those are the two versions, a tipped and an untipped tie. So I hope that answered your question. So the next question is about how we hold our trousers up, and that was posed by Danny. And Danny asked the question about what's the best way of keeping your trousers up, and is it a case of belts, is it a case of side adjusters, is it a case of braces? So my personal opinion is that most people will traditionally buy their trousers now where they have belt loops, and they'll use a belt to hold their trousers up. It's not the only method, but it's the most common when you go into a shop and buy in store. What I would say is that there are some complications potentially when you wear a belt that a lot of people don't really observe, and that is if you're quite large in the waist, then a belt will only tighten the trousers around your waist. So if you're quite a large belly, chances are if you're of this angle, so your belly is here and you go like that, chances are the belt's going to migrate southwards and end up underneath your belly. So it emphasises your paunch, if you like. So it's not the ideal look that most people would want to go with. So a belt is a great way of holding your trousers up, there's no denying that. What I would say is if you're going to use a belt, try and coordinate the colour of the belt with the colour of your shoes as best you can. The other thing to consider is if your weight fluctuates quite a lot, you know, you put on a few pounds, you lose a few pounds, and to get by, some belts are made for certain lengths, so suddenly you won't be able to use the belt you used to use, and another time it'll be too big. So maybe consider, for when you're wearing casual stuff, something like this. Now this is an elasticated belt, but it has a leather finish, and it coordinates quite well with brown shoes and dark trousers, for example, and it's not a bad option to consider. But what I would say is that if we're going to go for a more dressed trouser rather than the casual look, then maybe we're looking at something like this, where we have a closure, side adjusters on the trousers. And so these are grey flannels, but you can see quite clearly here there is a sidebar adjuster, And this means that the trousers are free of any belt loops, which is quite a good look if you're going to actually wear trousers and maybe a shirt in the summer months. Something else to consider is when they come to side adjusters, there are different variations of them. And here is another one. So this is a clamped version, if you like. And again, as you can see, it gives you a cleaner line on the trouser. So you don't have those belt loops everywhere. Now, when it comes to braces, braces is another way of doing it. And I suggest if you're quite large in the waist area, then maybe braces are a great way, because they'll actually suspend your trousers at your natural waist height and not underneath that paunch that we were talking about. And whilst you can have the actual braces with integrated buttons on the trousers so they look a little bit more aesthetic, I would say if you haven't got them, have them made, your trousers adjusted to accommodate buttoned braces. But if you haven't got that, or you only need a pair temporarily, then maybe consider something like this. Okay. Now I know they're not ideal, but they do suspend the trousers at the right level, and they aren't supposed to be seen. Braces should be a hidden garment as such. So with a waistcoat over the braces, the chances are nobody will ever realise you're wearing them. So don't be afraid to consider braces, especially if you're a portly person and you find your trousers constantly migrating southwards, then a pair of braces might be the answer to your question. I would suggest maybe try clip-on ones initially and then make adjustments so that you can have the belt loops removed potentially and buttons put on the trousers to accommodate button-down braces in the long term. But clip-ons are great just to see if you like the idea of them or if you can get on with them. So the next question is about hosiery. It's about socks in particular, and this question was posed by John, who simply asked the question, what is the sock etiquette? Do we wear socks that go with the trousers or sock colours that go with the shoes? So that's an interesting question, and I'm going to answer this question quite in depth, because there are a number of options available to the individual, and depending on what you want to create as an image depends on how you might wear your socks. So for example, traditionally the socks should match the colour of the trousers, and then the shoes obviously is a different thing. So black and navy are the typical colours you might see, and what I would suggest is that is the more formal look. So I tend to break down the way I wear my socks into ultra formal, for example black tie, then I would be wearing black socks, to formal suit wearing where I'd wear maybe a navy suit, so I'd wear navy socks, or a grey suit or charcoal grey, so I wear charcoal grey socks. Then when it gets to the middle section, this is where it gets interesting, because maybe I'll introduce a little bit of colour, but the colour might be, for example, picking out a highlight colour or accent, and this is where I might wear grey socks with a blue suit, or grey socks with a black pair of trousers, or maybe alternate. So if I'm wearing a navy suit, wear those grey socks. If I'm wearing a grey suit, then maybe blue socks, and maybe something that's got a little bit of texture to it as well. for example, these go really well with a grey charcoal suit if you want to stand out. And it's all about that element of what you're using the socks for. So I would suggest for the formal events, get the socks to match the trousers. Now, sometimes it's interesting to be able to contrast the socks between the shoes and the trousers. So for example, if you were wearing black shoes, black trousers, then maybe those charcoal grey socks or grey socks in between will give you a contrast, a distinct change, so you can see where the trousers end and the shoes start. That's another option open to you. What I would say when it comes to socks, then it's one of those hidden garments, but one that really does mean a lot when you're wearing them. So for example, when you're wearing socks, this element here where the actual toe part is sewn onto the main last of the sock, that area there you can get a little ridge build up, and that's where it's been sewn on. That can be uncomfortable if it digs in. So try and get one that's quite smooth and interlocked, and that way you'll get a much better comfortable fit when you're wearing socks. Also, socks themselves come in different deniers, different thicknesses, okay? The thinner they are and the more finer they are, I would suggest is the more elegant way to go. And always stick with natural materials, wool, cotton, silk, and in this day and age you can also pick up bamboo. So don't be afraid to wear something like that. Now when it comes to more casual wears, then we can start introducing something a little bit more patterned. I tend to wear something like this if I'm wearing something that I want a little bit of contrast, but I want a little bit of personality added into my sock wear. But this is something that I wouldn't necessarily wear with a suit. It might be more with the tweed jacket look or a sport jacket look. And they come in different colours as well. Quite bright, thicker wool socks here, but they go really well. Natural fibres wicks away a lot easier than artificial materials, which tends to make your feet sweat, and then we get odours forming. So these are quite nice colours, and because we've got a variation of colours, we could wear this with greys, blues, burnt orange colours, burgundies, light blues, and they would go quite well. In that they would contrast between the trouser and the shoe. Something else to bear in mind is if you really want to make a statement, then consider wearing something that is a lot more out there in their pattern and their colour range. But be careful with those sort of socks. Think about what you're matching this with. These sort of things go well with jeans and a pair of chinos, but don't overdo the rest of the ensemble with bright colours if you want these to be the statement piece. So it's quite a complex answer, but it is actually quite a complex subject. So if you're going for really formal colours, then try and pair the socks to go with the trousers. Generally, if you're talking about most formal of colours, then we're talking about black tie or something along those lines. Then we're talking about black suit, we're talking about black shoes anyway, and the contrast of a black sock goes in there and it probably will seem seamless from the trouser through to the shoe. If you want to add a little bit of contrast, then maybe go for a slightly lighter grey. That would go really well with that. If we're talking about blues, then again maybe a little bit of a lighter blue in there to show that contrast. But for example, if you're wearing black shoes, to put black socks with them would not really go if you're wearing grey trousers. Although you can do that and it is accepted that you can do that, I tend to go the other way. I try and find an interim colour between the colour of the trousers. So for example, charcoal grey trousers, black shoes. I try and find something a little bit lighter in between so you can distinctly see the difference between the trouser and the shoe. And to be fair, it's about making it look easy, elegant, unrestrained and uncomplicated. So there's your answer. Hope that helps. So the final subject is about Brogue shoes, and this was posed by Morris again, and he said that you seem to wear a lot of brown Brogue shoes, and in truth I do, because most of the time I wear semi-casual informal suit wears, which means that I can get away with wearing brown brogues. But what I would say is there is quite a range and diversity of brogue shoes, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So whilst we talk about country brogues, so here's a pair of country brogues, and the reason why they're country brogue is because of the thickness of the sole and the size of the broguing as well. Shows its big holes there. Pebbled, for example, is much more of a country vibe. Triple soled as well, so you're talking about very chunky, hard wearing shoes. And this also comes across, for example, here it's a little bit accentuated because we've got those large broguing on the actual shoe. Again, a very thick sole. You can tell it's a thick sole because you can hardly bend the shoe. Very much a country look. So country brogues, think about it, thick soles, thick in construction, heavy leather, and also those large brogue holes. Now when it comes to city, or what they call town brogues, these are a little bit more elegant, a little bit more slim-lined. So you can see here they're a little bit more pointed on the toe, and soles a little bit thinner. Brogue holes are a lot smaller, and so you get an overall a much more elegant look to the actual shoe. Black being more formal. Oxford closure on all of the shoes I'm showing you here. And here's a brown pair here, another pair, albeit you can see this is a brown brogue, still quite small brogue holes there, but you can see more about the shape of the shoe. It's a narrower, tapered look, not a thick sole on it at all. So this is definitely a town brogue or a city brogue. There are other versions as well, for example, chisel toes and more of a spade finish. That is definitely a city look. So Morris, I hope that answers your question. The colours are probably something to consider, black being the more formal all the way down to light tans. So on a sliding scale of importance, if you like, then we're talking about black, high shine black, all the way down to dark browns, lighter tans, and then we end up in the area of suedes, and then into the heavier broguing shoes, which is more the country look than the town vibe. And again, that we're talking about introducing tweed jackets and stuff like that to go with that heavier broguing pattern. For example, this. And then we end up with something like this, which is almost, well, these are for Scottish uniform, and they are really hard wearing and go really well with that country formal look, which is, for example, if we're wearing heavy tweed or we're wearing tartan, this is normally where you'd employ something like this. So there we go. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe, then please feel free to do so. We have a Buy Me a Coffee page, so if you'd like to make a contribution to the channel, then please feel free to do so. We also love constructive comments, so if you'd like to make some, jot them down below. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. And if you've got a question you'd like to pose to us or you'd like an answer to, then why not jot it down? We'll try and answer your question for you. We also like ideas for future videos, so if you want to make a contribution and make a suggestion about future content, then please, again, jot it in the notes below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. The next video could be something that you've recommended or suggested. So until next time, take care.